Have you ever looked around and wondered why our lives can turn out so differently, even when on the surface we all seem pretty similar? Well, today we're diving into a really unique theory that suggests our destiny isn't shaped by what we see in the mirror, but by a kind of hidden microscopic evolution that's happening inside of us every single second. So let's start with that big puzzle, right? We all share the same basic human blueprint, but one person lives this long, healthy life, and someone else gets hit with a sudden illness. Why the huge difference? This theory argues that the real answers aren't in our genes or even our lifestyles. They're in a dimension that's completely invisible to us. And here it is, the core idea from the source material. It puts it pretty bluntly. The really big differences between us, they're not in the bodies we can see. In fact, it says the differences in the microscopic structure of our bodies are huge. This unseen world, according to this theory, is where our real life paths are being decided. Okay, so if all the important stuff is happening at this tiny microscopic level, we kind of have to redefine a basic concept first. What exactly is life in this framework? According to the source, life isn't the physical body itself. No, it's what they call a countermaterial structure that's linked to it. You can almost think of it like an invisible energy field or a blueprint. The evolution of that structure is what really matters. And it's not driven by big, obvious changes, but by all these constant, tiny shifts happening inside us. It's a whole new way of looking at what it means to be alive. All right, so if our real evolution is happening in this unseen, microscopic world, what's driving it all? What's the engine that's causing all these constant changes?
The theory says there's this constant push and pull from two different kinds of forces. You've got your internal world. Every single thought, emotion, desire, all of it is described as a force that physically changes your microscopic structure. And then you've got the external world. Things like sunlight, sound, even heat and cold, constantly shaping you from the outside in.
And the source gives us this really vivid example of how it works. A thought or a feeling isn't just some abstract thing in your head. It triggers a real physical change. The sight of someone you're attracted to, well, that sets off a whole cascade of physical reactions, right? A rapid heartbeat, sweaty palms, things that just don't happen if you're looking at, say, a pig. It shows how our inner world is constantly creating these real microscopic shifts inside our bodies. Now, this is where the theory gets really unique. I mean, if all these tiny changes are happening all the time, there has to be a way to keep score, doesn't there? And that brings us to this idea of the electron ledger. So, yeah, that's the big question, right? How do you track all of this? If every single thought and every ray of sunshine is changing us, how is our evolutionary progress, or our regress, actually measured? The answer, according to the source, is a system of what it calls evolution electrons. It says that every single human being starts with a baseline of exactly 100. And this isn't just some random number. It's the very foundation of your existence as a human. From that starting point, every single thing you do will either add to that number or subtract from it. And here's a look at the negative side of that ledger. What's so fascinating is how specific it is. An act like poisoning spirituality, which the source says is like undermining someone's faith, that costs you a whopping 6 electrons. Something like jealousy costs you 1. So in this view, these aren't just moral mistakes. They're actual quantifiable events that are pushing your electron count down and moving you further away from the human state. But of course, the system works both ways. Through positive actions, you can rack up electrons and evolve upwards. And the source gives us a very specific target. Gain 900 more electrons to hit a total of 1,000. If you manage that, your human life structure is said to dissolve, and you're reborn into a higher state of being, what the text actually calls an immortal. Okay, so how does this really abstract theory of an electron ledger apply to the most profound things we all face? Let's try to decode life and death using this very unique lens. So, why do some people die very suddenly while others linger with a long illness? The source explains it through the speed of electron change. A sudden death, like a heart attack, is described as your electron count just plummeting past the threshold for another life form. For example, if it hits 80, that's the number for a dog. But a long illness, that means the count is changing way too slowly, essentially leaving that person's life structure stuck in this limbo state between human and whatever comes next. Now, for those people lingering in that state, the source offers some pretty unconventional advice to help finish the journey. It lays out a choice. You can deliberately take a negative path, cursing people, blaspheming, to shed electrons faster. Or you can take a positive path, forgiving enemies and wishing peace for everyone. There's also a third option, which involves having a guide help you detach from the world by explaining the nature of higher realities. All right, let's pull the camera way, way back now. We're going to zoom out from the individual to the entire planet, because this theory applies the exact same logic of cosmic balance to explain what's happening to our world. So here's a claim from the source that is, well, it's pretty startling. The reason the human population is exploding, it says, is because the animal population is shrinking. In this worldview, when animals are killed by humans, they're seen as having made a contribution. This earns them merit, enough merit to be reborn as a human. This creates a kind of one-way street, from the animal kingdom straight to the human one. And this chart just lays it out for us, plain and simple. As the human population goes up, the animal population goes down, creating what the source calls a seriously dangerous ecological imbalance, one that could lead to disaster for all of us. So, if the planet is this dangerously out of balance, what's the solution? The source wraps everything up by laying out 3 possible paths for humanity's future. And these 3 paths present a really stark choice. Path 1 is the best-case scenario. A whole bunch of us evolve upward, which naturally reduces our numbers here on Earth. Path 2 is a consciously managed plan, and this includes the really shocking idea of forcibly transitioning some people to the animal level who would supposedly get some kind of cosmic payback later. And Path 3, well, that's the grim warning. If we don't choose one of the first 2, nature will correct the imbalance itself through war, plague, and famine. The text itself doesn't frame this as some prophecy of doom, though. It actually presents itself as a warning that's meant to help us. It says its whole purpose is to enlighten humanity so we can actively choose a better path and, avoid that worst-case scenario. And that's where this all leaves us. This whole theory ends by turning this grand cosmic system right back on us, with one final provocative question. If every thought you had and every action you took was truly being recorded on some unseen ledger, what would yours say about you?